He's been a sports enthusiast since he was a kid. Games changed when he grew up, but his passion at excelling in whatever he did remained the same. And that's when poker chose him. Since then, he has won almost all the major poker tournaments in India. Today, he is the most sought-after poker coach in India. Not just that, he is also a poker commentator and has anchored many poker events across India. He is Abhishek Goindi.
Abhishek, welcome to today's podcast episode. I'm happy that you found the time. I don't think you have to introduce yourself a lot, but maybe you can tell us 2-3 sentences about you for the people who see you the first time.
Thank you, Karim. Yeah, we finally made it happen. And I think it's a lot to do with your follow-up skills, which I kind of learned from you during this entire process as to how to follow up with people. A little bit about me. I'm an Indian poker player, like you know, and I look Indian, pretty Indian, right? And I've been playing poker for almost like 14, 15 years. Probably one of the first few professional poker players from India. So it's been a really long journey. And it's been an interesting one because poker never existed in India when I started to a complete, fully fledged industry right now. And along the way, I realized that I wanted to branch out in poker as well. So I did a bunch of stuff along the way, like commentary. I did a bit of hosting and I've done a lot of coaching as well. I've set up the Poker Bootcamp India, which is India's first online poker school. So that's a little bit about me.
That's exactly what I wanted to start with today because I'm a big fan of the Poker Bootcamp, right? I know this is a great project. You put a lot of effort in. I know you put like 120% in for each one of the people who are in there. And that's something that is always really intriguing for me because I'm the same, right? I also want my clients to be successful. I put the extra work in. And I think people see this. And if people see that you do the extra step for them or you take the extra step for them, that's what attracts even more people. That's also why I wanted to have this podcast, why I was like following up all the time, because I know you're a great person. I know you put in the extra effort. And that's exactly what I look for in the guests from the show. We talked about the mindset work and we talked about that some people in the Poker Bootcamp, they not really sure how much this really benefits them. First of all, I want to start with the question of when did you start with mindset work and when would you recommend someone to start with working on their mindset?
I actually started with my mindset work very early on without even realizing that I was working on my mindset. It's something that came to me very naturally when I was a kid. I got a lot of it from my dad, to be honest. He would just keep drilling this into my mindset. And I played a lot of sport growing up as a kid, lots of sport growing up as a kid. And I continue to play sports, which is where I think I kind of developed the mindset. And I also traveled a lot. I've probably been to over 30 countries, a lot of solo traveling as well. So you kind of learn a lot of these things along the way. You kind of learn how to deal with challenges. You kind of learn adversity. You kind of learn unpredictability. You learn so many things. And then poker kind of helped me shape this mindset too. And there were just so many things that I learned from poker as well. So I kind of learned it along the way. And I always realized that being strong in your mind was always going to give you the edge. And just to tell you about who my role model was growing up was Kobe Bryant. You know, so he's all about the Mamba mentality. So that was like a big inspiration for me when I was growing up because I play a lot of basketball and basketball was my go-to sport. So I kind of, I inculcated his mentality in my work and my day-to-day job. So that's where I think I got the initial mindset, hook from. And then I realized how important it was. And then I just started developing my own mindset along the way. And so I think it's a lot to do with Kobe Bryant. That's where the inspiration came from. And
when would you recommend someone to start working on your mindset? You started very early. And I think also solo traveling is huge. Having role models is huge.
I think mindset has to happen throughout. There's never a good moment. I think like you always have to keep your mindset on. You always have to keep evolving because I believe the brain is a muscle, right? So you have to keep training it as exactly like how you have to train your body. You know, so a lot of times I find poker players, especially in the bootcamp and lower stakes more than the higher stakes, is wherein they're like, okay, first let me learn the game. Let me learn how to 3-bet. Let me learn how to 4-bet. Let me learn how to c-bet. Let me learn bet sizing. And then I will focus on my mindset. You know, but what I believe is that mindset is in parallel with everything else that you learn in the game. Yes, it's tougher because initially you're like, hey man, I just want to learn the trick of the trade. But a lot of people don't understand how important mindset is in the process of learning the trick of the trade, you know? So like you keep hearing growth mindset, fixed mindset, you know, your attitude is everything, which I think is definitely true. And one of the things that stuck with me is it's your attitude and not your aptitude that basically shows you how far you go in life, right? So it's something that really stuck with me, and it's something that I've kept working on. And I believe that everybody should keep working on their mindset, because you always want to keep unlocking that little bit, every day. I just want to keep going little bit, just want to keep going forward and forward and forward. Because if you don't, then you're going to stagnate. And if once you stagnate, then you can even drop, so then coming back is going to take you more time. So I believe that you should always keep doing it. And of late, I've been noticing the trend in the high stakes community that people are kind of understanding that that's where the edge is also going to lie, because the edges in the game are getting so close that everyone's like, all right, where do we gain an edge? And they understand that mindset is where we can gain the edge. I see a trend of a lot of high stakes poker players going into understanding and working on their mindset. But I feel like it's also a natural course. Like the lower stakes and the mid stakes guys probably don't understand the value of mindset. And I can understand why as well, because it is tough and you have to kind of invest so much time in it. And people kind of want to like jump into poker to try to make money quickly. So when they're like playing low stakes and mid stakes, their prime focus is to just make money or profit from the game. For some people, it's growth in the game, but very few understand the correlation with mindset and playing poker, or everything else in life for that matter.
I was also thinking about this question a lot lately, and I was thinking about when is the right time for the average person to start working on the mindset. And for me, after really thinking about this for like days and weeks, I thought that, of course, if someone is a complete beginner, right? If he has like no idea about hand ranges or how to free bet or whatever, right? In position, out position, what is that, right? If he has no clue about this, then of course he has to learn the basics. Without the basic strategy of like, okay, what is the best hand in poker and stuff like that? If someone doesn't even know that, right? Then start with the basics, of course. But then what happens is, as soon as you have the basics down, and I think if you really put in the effort, you can understand the basics really fast. And especially with the Poker Bootcamp India, right? You have people who can teach you that. But if you understand the basics, then you want to be aware enough to realize, okay, so what has more benefit for me? For example, I know people who tilted so hard, they lost thousands of dollars. Not just on the poker table, but also they destroyed walls, like punched holes in the walls, destroyed their phones, stuff like that. So that is on top of the losing. Basically, the question is, what has more benefit for you? And I think if you're really aware, and that's something that high stakes poker players have, right? They are aware of what is missing. And then they can honestly ask themselves, is it more beneficial to study a little bit more free bet pots, for example? Or is it more beneficial to take a look in controlling my emotions better or dealing better with the swings, as an example?
I have a lot of friends of mine who've also punched walls and broken phones, and it's very common, and losing thousands of dollars. I actually think losing thousands of dollars might be the silver lining, because I know people who've gone broke by tilting, right? You can just deposit money and just keep clicking buttons and go broke every night, So just to have the mindset of being able to walk away from the table as well, just to have the mindset of being able to understand that you're tilting, you need to get away, know when to book a loss. And like you rightly mentioned about understanding the basics, it's very easy to understand the basics, understand what range is, understand what position is, understand what stack size is, understand board textures. But having said that, I think while people learn what ranges are and what board textures are and what stack sizes are, I think one of the key components is how they have to perceive the situation based on the outcome. Yes, you can go and explain to someone that this is what a range means, right? But at the same time, you need to kind of like explain to them, especially when you're coaching, you kind of have to explain to them or kind of have to tell them how to interpret the outcome. Because let's say they get a bad beat, right? You got to explain to them as to how to interpret the bad beat, so that it kind of has an impact on them in a positive way. Because you can interpret the bad beat as, hey, I'm getting unlucky, and then you'd be like, okay, go blow it up. Or you can interpret the bad beat as, you can play victim and be like, hey, why is it always happening to me? I saw the other guy sucking out on him, right? So it's how you basically interpret the outcome, which I think is very, very important in person A versus person B, right? Because at the end of the day, ace king is ace king. We all know ace king is ace king. We all know 20 big blinds is 20 big blinds. We all know we have to jam ace king when we have like 10 big blinds for most part, right? So we know all of those things, right? But how do you interpret the same thing when your ace king doesn't hold up, or when your aces don't hold up, or when you bubble in a tournament, you lose to a weaker opponent, So interpreting those emotions and then carrying forward those emotions or understanding how it works is what I think is very important in the overall scheme of things, And when someone starts off slow and starts off at a low stakes level, and if you can start filling in these kind of interpretations, even from the beginning, I feel like then tilt automatically gets way better in the process of in each person, in the sense like they start tilting lesser because they kind of understand how to interpret each emotion. And I think the biggest aspect, honestly, is just playing stakes that you're comfortable. so that there's a cost of learning, I believe. So you can play stakes that you're comfortable, experiment a lot, so that when your aces get busted, you don't really it doesn't really hurt you. But at the same time, you get the lesson that you need. That hey, it's going to lose 20% of the times. If you lose a flip, you get the lesson that you need. It's going to lose 50% of the times. So I believe that that's probably what's needed in players.
I 100% agree. Tilt is one aspect, but I think for the mental game of poker, there's so much more involved. You said like the 20%, right? Like aces, you lose 20% of the time. And what is very interesting is that it's very simple for people to understand, like a flip 50-50, right? You have a coin flip, we flip 1,000 times and we will be nearly break even. Yeah. But 80-20 is a little bit more difficult to understand, or 23.5%, right? That's even more difficult. And sometimes it feels really unfair. Sometimes it feels like I should win 80% and just lose 20% of the time. But it feels like the opposite, right? It feels like I'm losing 80% of the time. I know stories where people came to me and they said, I lost 5 times with aces in a row. The 6th time I have to win. I have to win the 6th time, right? I said, no, you still have 80-20, right? You have always 80-20. So it's not that you lose 5 times and you have 90-10 or like 99% chance of winning, right? It's always the same. That is what for some people so difficult to understand, that we talk about percentages here. Certain probability to win a certain hand. And on each street, you have a different probability.
Taking into consideration what you said, in fact, that's the first chapter of the Poker Bootcamp India. Right?
Awesome.
That's the first chapter, because the first thing people need to understand is equities and understanding variance, So it's funny because everyone says variance in poker, especially I'm talking about like India, right? Whenever I coach or whenever the bootcamp coaches coach, I'm like, everyone's like, yeah, variance. Everyone's like variance. But then when I ask them what is variance, nobody can answer the question. Nobody's able to tell me the answers to what is variance, right? They're just like, yeah, variance, variance, variance. It's like a loosely thrown word. It's a jargon to look cool, right? But I'm like, okay, so what is variance? Explain to me variance, right? And then very few people can explain it to me, right? And then you have to kind of break it down. So I break it down in a very simple way, because I believe the human mind has a very small ability to understand probabilities in real life situations, and has very selective memory, right? So when something bad happens, then people kind of remember it. And then they start basing their entire life on that one incident. Something as simple as this, like you meet with an accident. I've met people who met with an accident on the bike or a car and they stopped driving because they met with an accident once. But what is the probability of it going to happen like multiple times again and again? Doesn't mean you stop driving, right? So small things like this, I've seen people like react and take this based like one incident, rather than understanding that, hey man, this happens once in a while, so it's still fine, right? I know people who don't want to take flights and they always take trains because they're scared of flights, because they think probability of dying in a flight is high. But they don't realize that actually flights are the safest mode of transport. It's safer than walking. It's safer than driving. It's safer than running. It's safer than cycling. But they don't understand it. They think, oh no, like if you fall off the flight, you're going to die. Yes, you're going to die. What is the chances of the flight basically crashing, right? So I take all these examples, and then once I break down these examples to people, they kind of understand it a lot better. So to give you the simplest example, especially aces versus whatever hand you want to take, right? So I'm telling a person, so when I, like at the boot camp, there was a time where I was like, okay, you understand variance? You have these aces stories. Everyone has an aces story, right? Everyone's like, oh, my aces got cracked. There's not one big, that doesn't say the aces hasn't got cracked, right? Like that's their favorite. It's either aces getting cracked or ace king getting cracked. And the third most popular story that I hear is that whenever I have kings, the ace comes on the flop. Right? That's the third most popular story that I hear. Okay, these are the top 3 stories that I hear. Whenever I have kings, there's an ace on the flop, or my ace is getting cracked, or my ace king not holding up, right? And all I tell them is, okay, man, you have a coin. What are the chances of head and tails? And everybody in chorus is like 50-50. I'm like, all right, great. But when I toss it 10 times, is it coming 5 and 5? And everybody in chorus is like, no. I'm like, but why? Isn't it 50-50? Shouldn't it be 5 and 5? But when we toss a coin, why is it like 7 heads and 3 tails, or like 2 heads and 8 tails? And then you can see the epiphanies, you can see their minds just going boom, 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 boom. I'm like, similarly, guys, aces versus kings is 80-20. So when it happens, it's not necessary that you have to win 8 out of 10 times. You can lose 8 out of 10 times. But in the long run, it's going to be closer to 80-20. And then you can kind of see them like being like, oh, okay, fine. And then you can be like, boom, 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 boom. It like settles down, right? So they understand it. But then the next challenge is, how do they put it into practicality? Like that becomes the next challenge. So yeah, it's very, very common to see these people. And I'm sure you see a lot of this because you're a mindset coach yourself, right? So I'm sure you see people coming to you and complaining about this all the time and playing victim. that their ace is always getting cracked. What do you tell them though?
So I like what you just said, right? With the explanation. That is really, really nice. I will remember that for my clients too. I also have a lot of people who come to me and they talk about bad beat stories or that they're really unlucky and stuff like that. And I want to explain one concept that goes a little bit deeper, but I think it's really interesting for people to understand, especially if people go into this victim role, right? There's one phenomenon in psychology, which is called the concept of shared experience. Let's say you have a high stakes poker player, right? And you're here in the beginning and you want to go all the way to that level. What happens is that everyone who goes through that journey goes for a very similar experience.
Okay.
So that means the person on top, the high stakes poker player, had the bad beats. They had the aces cracked. They had like down swings, right? They had days where he cries himself to bed. He had days where he said, I cannot take it anymore, right? So you have to go through a very similar journey. And this is when mindset work comes into play, because if you want to be on top, you have to go through similar challenges. You have to go through adversity. And only if you go through each individual challenge, you will end up on top. So the people on top, they earned it. If you see the Triton series, you know, people playing for hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, right? Those people, they earned it. And if you want to play the same, because I have people who tell me, I want to play the Triton series. This is my goal, right? And I say, you have to go through a hard journey. So it's a concept of shared experience. And I always link it back to the goals. Because some people who go into the victim role, those are the people who are a lot of times really ambitious. And said, if you want to achieve your goals, you have to go through the adversity. What you tell me, the bad beat stories, right? Because it's like, it's only me. It's like, oh, like my friends are all winning, but only me, right? And I said, no, right? No. I find thousands of people who has similar experiences. So we all go through the same at the end of the day.
So what you said, I resonate with it because I didn't know it was called the concept of shared experiences in terms of psychology, but I call it the range of motions, right? So in the bootcamp, when I teach these guys, I'm like, you have to go through the range of motions to understand what you're going through. It's normal. So there's a little journey, you know, like where you start somewhere, you bink a tournament, and all of a sudden you think you're on top of the world. So you go through a range of motions when you start getting entitled. You go through a range of motions where you feel overconfident, where you think you can crush everybody. And then you'll see a lot of times that the guys who are on top, suddenly when they bink a tournament, they go through like a purple patch, where they start binking like 3-4 tournaments in a row. And then suddenly they can't win a tournament at all. And then they go on like a downswing all of a sudden. And then when they're going on the downswing, they go through another range of motions. They're like, wait a minute, you know, what's going on? I'm getting unlucky. All these thoughts start to come into their head, right? And then when they reach an ultimate low, they start getting self-doubt, right? Where they're like, hey, was I just getting lucky, or was I good enough? And whatever they're trying to do doesn't work anymore. Their C bets don't work. Their 3 bets don't work. Their all-ins don't hold. And then they start self-doubting as well, you know? So there's so many ranges. And then you kind of like have to work your way up again, you know, and understand that, hey, man, this is not what it is. So having a strong mindset in that aspect kind of avoids all these range of motions, right? But it also comes along with these range of motions because it's, like you said, shared experiences. So you have to go through all of these emotions and understand how to counter each of these, because they're all psychological traps, in my opinion, right? When you're winning, you're like, hey, nobody can stop me. So I've seen people stop putting in the work when they start winning, right? Because they're like, yeah, now I know it. They feel like they've achieved. They're like, now I know it. Like I won 3 tournaments. I made my bankroll. I made $100,000. I don't need to do shit anymore. You know, only to realize that few months later that it's just going, the graph just goes down, right? And then they're trying to fight, and then they're not putting in as much work. And then they start playing victim, and then suddenly they lose focus because now people who they thought they were better than are winning. When they start winning, they're like, how is this happening? They're winning, I'm not winning. They start feeling like they're the ones who are getting unlucky in the world. And, you know, it just propels you in a very weird spiral downwards, right? So that's where I feel like the mindset becomes extremely, extremely important, because in these tough conditions, you need to know what you really need to do. And which is why actually one of the slogans or one of the taglines, which I go by, and a lot of people know this, and a lot of people say, trust the process. So you'll hear a lot of bootcamp guys saying, trust the process, because I'm like, man, just stick to the process. You know, like if you stick to the process, you're going to make money in the long run. You know, like if you start deviating from the process, you're going to slip, you're going to fly, you're going to slip, and you're going to go everywhere. And this came from me learning myself as well, because it happened to me. I went through all these range of motions. It's been like 14, 15 years. So like you said, if you want to reach a particular level, you have to go through the same journey. And now, because I coach so many people, I can look and tell where he is in his journey. I'm like, oh, this guy's going to make these mistakes. Oh, this guy's going to be on this path. Oh, this guy's going to have this. You can see the tendencies, right? And then it boils down on me as a coach to stop those pitfalls, you know, to make them be like, hey, this is going to happen. watch. And a couple of my students actually binked a really, really big tournament in India, one of the biggest tournaments in India, where they got a score for like $80,000, right? And the first thing I called him I was like, enjoy the win, but stick to the process, right? I'm like, don't let this win carry you over. You're going to feel these emotions. The media is going to come after you. You're going to get all these highlights. Everyone's going to slowly change their perspective towards you and be like, hey man, he's the boss. He's the winner. He's won like $80,000. You're going to get all the media attention. You're going to be at interviews. Your parents are going to be like extremely proud about you. It's going to be on social media. You're going to get a lot of likes. People you never liked and people who didn't like you are going to come around and start talking to you again, So a lot of these things are going to happen. So you need to know how to like just cut the noise and stick to playing the game and continue to play the game. But I guess it's the range of motions, like that's what I call it. Yeah, they have to go through it to understand it, to learn it, So that's my way of understanding what you said about shared experiences.
Let's link it back, because I think that's the key element here of our podcast. It can literally make people thousands of dollars if they understand how important mindset work is. The example that you gave, if someone is winning and then he's becoming lazy, he's like, oh, I made it, right? I made it happen. The attention gets to him. He becomes lazy. He goes down. He is used to being lazy, right? He's like, oh, I'm able to do it. But from 100K, he goes to 50 and he's like, maybe I should put more effort in. But then it's quite hard to like start the process again, right? And then he's losing. And then at the end of the day, he lost $90,000 just because he was not working on his mindset. I give you another example of the opposite side. So someone who makes a little bit of money, but he's like stuck, and then he's losing it, and then he's like going up to a certain level, and then he's stuck. And he thinks like, poker's unbeatable. Poker's unbeatable, right? So he gets negative in his mind and he creates something that is called a self-fulfilling prophecy, because the brain is so powerful, and whatever you believe will come true. So if you believe poker is unbeatable, it will be unbeatable for you. And then you have selective focus, something you also mentioned, right? You only focus on certain moments, and then you only see people who never made it in poker, and you're like, nothing works, right? Like everyone who is lying who wins at poker, right? And then you create that reality of everyone is lying. And then of course you cannot make it. But that is like, maybe you had and I see people like that have huge potential. They had huge potential, and they would be able to play like Triton events if they would fix their mindset. And then they lose thousands of dollars, and more important, time, if they don't focus on the mindset. So I think it's extremely important to really make people aware of how powerful it is. And it's not just learning how to free bet. That's one thing, and it's still important to know how to do it. But it's also important to be aware that poker is a mental game, a really challenging game mentally. And that you need to be tactically or technically really good, but also mentally. And only if you combine both worlds, this is when you make the most out of yourself and your career.
I completely agree on it. And which is why it's called a mind sport, right? The mindset aspect is something that no one can take away from you, right? If you build it in a particular way. It's kind of like this saying, people can take your bank balance, people can take your assets, people can take your jobs, but they can never take your fit body, right? A fit body is something that you always keep, and it's something that will show because you worked on it. So nobody can ever take your fit body away from you, but they can take everything else away from you. So similarly, nobody can take your mindset away from you, but they can take everything else away from you. Everything else is a byproduct and a function of how your mindset is and how you perceive things and how you basically interpret things. But I also believe that a lot of your mindset is to do with the people you surround yourself with, the people you interact with. One of the reasons people are not able to grow their mindset in this game, based on my interpretation and based on what I believe or perceive, is because it's a very isolated sport. It's a independent sport. It's a mano a mano kind of sport, right? Like it's me versus you. Like there are no friends on the poker table, right? And a lot of times, even your friends outside are basically your competitors at the same time. So where are you going to get that support system from? How are you going to go about like evolving your mindset? And a lot of times you can see like basically in poker, especially for new people, results determine how good a player is. So unfortunately, it's a process-driven game, but we live in a results-oriented world. It's really tough to like know that you're putting in the work, but you're not getting in the effort. Getting in the results. While you see like random people who are not putting in the work get results. And so it can be really tough on yourself. So at that point, I believe like a support system becomes very, very important, where there is positive reinforcement rather than negative reinforcement. So people need that positive validation and the action to know if like they're on the right path or not. And that's where even me as a coach and the Poker Bootcamp India is what we're trying to inculcate in a country like India, which is so new, right? And I'm sure you're doing the same with your clients, because I've seen some of it with your clients as well, which is why we're doing the podcast, right? So we both relate to the fact that mindset is extremely, extremely important, and I feel like having a support system is very important in poker. It's tough because it's an individual game at the same time. So the way I look at it is I try to equate it to maybe like golf or tennis, where tennis is so mental, so is golf. And the conditions are changing every day in golf. The same golf course has different conditions every single day. So on one day you're basically, you can probably be at par, and one day you can like be up plus like whatever, 8 plus 9. Because it's the same course at the end of the day, but the conditions change. The green is different, the wind speeds are different, the clouds are different, everything is different, right? But at the same time, although the individual sports, they have a team that they work with. Even tennis, you see their coaching staff. They've got like a physical coach, they've got a technical coach, they've got a performance coach, they've got like a nutritionist. They have a bunch of people, but at the end of the day, you're supposed to go out there alone and fight, right? Similarly with golf, you got your caddies and you got everybody else who's helping you get the best shot out there. So similarly in poker, I believe that we need to have these pillars in our system, whether it's a mindset coach, whether it's a technical coach, whether it's a friend or a community or a support system for you to grow, is what I believe. So surrounding yourself with the right audience and surrounding yourself with like trusted parties and being able to take like constructive criticism and feedback, I think is what is very important for this game as well. So that's how I perceive it.
I 100% agree. And if you take a look at the highest paid athletes in the world, you see that all of them, as you said, have a team behind them. And they definitely have people like mindset coaches in their team, or as you said, performance coaches. It's there for a reason. I love to watch fighting sports. And it's one of my dreams to at some point work with the UFC fighters and stuff like that as their mindset coach. This is one of my dreams. And I think, and you see this all the time, you have fighters and they have very similar conditions, right? They know how to punch, they know how to kick, they know how to grapple, right? They know what to eat, they know how to train. But at the end of the day, there are certain people who are champions for years, unbeaten for years. And you have other fighters who struggle to have like 2 wins in a row. It's impossible for them. But basically they're the same height, the same weight, right? They know how to throw punches and stuff like that. So the only really differentiating factor, in my opinion, is this machine right here.
I agree with you on this. And in fact, when I grew up, I was lucky that I fell in love with Kobe Bryant and his teachings, because everybody knows about Mamba mentality. Right. In fact, one of my IDs on one of the Indian sites is also Mamba mentality, based on Kobe Bryant. And I watched almost every video of his, drawn inspiration from each of his videos, and understood what it takes to be at the highest level. Right. I mean, to perform at the highest level. And as unfortunately, he's not here with us anymore. But in today's day and age, like, because I'm still very glued into sport. Now, my latest inspiration, honestly, is Novak Djokovic. And LeBron James, for that matter. I didn't grow up as a LeBron James fan, to be honest, because I was a Kobe fan. And but in the last 2-3 years, just seeing what he's done with longevity, with his body, and how he stayed at the top, it's kind of inspired me, because I've been in the poker industry for so long, for so many years, that now my mindset has changed to like longevity, how to keep staying at the top. So I try to draw inspiration from guys who've been at the top for very long, because it's easy to rise and it's easier to fall. So when people like LeBron James and Novak Djokovic are staying at the top for years, they must be doing something right. So I watch every interview of Novak Djokovic to see how he performs, see how he goes, see what he's thinking in the situation, and how he basically approaches the situation. I remember before the World Series of Poker main event last year, I was not doing too well at the World Series last year. I was just breaking everything for most part. And the main event was coming up. I break that too. But I remember watching his video. He just he won in the semifinals, and he was just going on to play Kyrgios in the finals. And he was talking about how he had a 5-setter game and how he was down 2-0. He basically came back from there thinking that it's a best of 3 game, and he has to win. Not best of 3. He has to come back and win just all 3. He's like, I forgot about it. It became a new match in my head. Although he was down 2-0, he was like, yeah, my task is cut out. I just have to win 3 in a row right now. And he just approached the game from a fact that he was not down 2-0, but he just changed the game in his head to like, he has to win the next 3. And he started playing the game in such a way to win the next 3. And he came back and won the next 3. right? So small things like this where you can trick your mind when you're playing in a positive way, but at the same time you can trick it to playing in a negative way, which can be detrimental to you. I believe that you kind of have to keep tricking your mind as and when you play, you know. It becomes very important. Maybe we can do this USC thing together at some point, man. It'll be fun.
Yeah, 100%. I just want to say, I don't want to a podcast going too long. And I know you're busy and you not have so much time. What I want to do is I will put a Poker Bootcamp link down below in the description. Your Instagram profile too in the description if people want to reach out to you personally. I'm sure some people will join after seeing this. I think they're in good hands when they start working with you.
I think so too with you as well. And I'm sure we can do another podcast soon. We were just a little hard pressed for time, but this has been great, man, talking to you. It's so much to learn from you as well on this particular aspect of things because you're the professional.
Thank you for watching the podcast. If you liked the video and you want to learn more about Tilt, I highly recommend you clicking the link down below in the description to get access to my brand new Tilt Buster course in which I explain how to get rid of Tilt within just 3 days. See you there.